Welcome to the Green Transition Show. With me, Dr. Francis Tuokuu. Climate change is the most topical issue in the 21st century, as it affects all aspects of human endeavor, be it political, economic, social, or environment. Carbon credits are often presented as a solution to dealing with our climate issues or climate problem. But critics have argued that carbon credits will only entrench inequality and limit local participation. With me on this episode to dissect the issues is Dr. Benjamin Batinga. He's an expert on climate finance and carbon credits. So today we'll understand whether or not carbon credits are a solution to dealing with our climate problem. If you are watching us for the first time, or if you have not subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button so that we'll continue to bring you such insightful conversations. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Thank you very much, Dr. Francis. It's been a while. It's good to see you. Yes.
Yeah, very good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's really been a while. How is Sunyani?
Oh, Sunyani is good. It's good. We are getting to the rainy season, so it's cool environment for now. Yeah.
Oh, great. So Dr. Benjamin Batinga is with University of Energy and Natural Resources in Sunyani, Ghana. Doc, please introduce yourself to our audience and tell us your areas of expertise, what you do, and then we'll start the conversation. It's going to be a very interactive conversation. It's going to be a very nice conversation, and I believe we'll learn a lot from this episode. And this is actually episode 10 of the Green Transition Show.
Thank you very much. As you already mentioned, so I'm Benjamin Batinge. I am a research fellow with the Regional Center for Energy and Environmental Sustainability, which is a center within the University of Energy and Natural Resources. So in terms of the faculties of the institution, I'm with School of Energy. I have a background in energy transitions. My PhD was on public and development management, specifically looking at energy transitions in Africa, which I did at the University of Stellenbosch, South Africa. Prior to that, I had my master's in systems modeling, system dynamics modeling at the University of Bergen, Norway. And system dynamics modeling actually was a conduit for my transdisciplinary research interest, from climate to energy to finance to economics, and even I've done works in agriculture, water, etc. So in brief, I would say that is all about me. So I'm happy to be here with you today and look forward to a wonderful discussion.
Yeah, thanks for such a wonderful introduction. And I know you've worked in Norway too, and you've done a lot of consultancies well for the UN, the World Bank, and other institutions. Tell us about those consultancies you did in brief.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So yes, I have undertaken different consultancies. So with World Bank, specifically the International Finance Corporation, I did some work on energy resource database in Africa for International Finance Corporation, which is within the World Bank. I've also done some climate risk assessment methodologies work for Green Climate Fund as a consultant. I've done some proposal works for government of Liberia. I have also done some works with the United Nations, specifically looking at water resources and integrations with agriculture, wildlife in the Kavango Transfrontier Conservation Area, which is a cross-section of about 5 countries in Southern Africa: Namibia, Angola, Botswana, Zimbabwe. So those currently I still do some consulting work for also private firms in Africa and also internationally, UNDP, etc. And it cuts across from specific climate issues to energy issues and also to really modeling issues. I would say most of my works in Ghana has been cross-cutting, whether it's for government agencies that looks at specific sectors, interaction of specific sectors, using models to see how different sectors from agriculture, water, energy, health, cities, etc. interact, and the implications of policies in one sector on others. So that is where I've been Yes, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, that's a solid background. And we are very excited to have you on the show. Viewers, if you're watching us, this is the Green Transition Show with me, Dr. Francis Tuokuu. Our guest is Dr. Benjamin Batinge. Doc, many of us have heard the term carbon credits, but our knowledge of carbon credits is quite limited. Can you explain to us what carbon credits are?
Sure. Thank you very much. So carbon credits, as you've probably heard also of carbon markets, carbon credits are basically tradable instruments. Tradable instruments, just as you will have, to simplify, those of you that have been in the financial space a bit, you heard of treasury bills, you heard of bonds, you heard of all those kind of securities, right? And so your carbon credits are also basically instruments which are based on certain amounts of carbon either reduced or avoided. So you reduce carbon and then you get credit for reducing that equivalent of carbon, or you avoid carbon and you get some credit for avoiding the carbon. So when we talk of reduction and avoidance, they are two different things, but they can both earn you some carbon credit. So reduction is, for example, let's say, if we say if you drive your car every day, you emit certain amount of CO2, and we are going to calculate that and say, well, you only have to emit 10% of your daily emissions. It means you are not allowed to drive beyond 10% of your emissions now. You basically need to go and look for a way to still drive so that you can do your daily activities. So you've been forced to reduce your emissions. That is the emission, the reduction angle. The avoidance angle is, say, for example, you need to provide energy for your household. We can still use a transport, but let's use just electricity now. You can use diesel-powered generator, but you know that is going to emit. So you decide to go buy solar PV. You have avoided the carbon that you would have otherwise emitted. So when we talk of carbon credits and we talk about everything in general, we look at you avoid the carbon either by reducing the amount you emit or taking an alternative route. And both basically end up with some carbon savings. You end up not emitting a given amount of carbon you otherwise would have. So that amount you have saved, that is the amount you have not emitted, then we can calculate the value and give you some credit and say you can take that value and go and sell in the market. We issue a certificate for you and say this is the amount of carbon you have saved. So you take it to the market. Some people who need to emit but already reach their limits, or they really just want some sort of corporate social responsibility to show that they are concerned about the environment, can come and pay you to buy your carbon credit. You can trade the credit that you have now earned and get money for being a good citizen and reducing carbon.
Yes,
basically. In simple terms.
Yes, that's quite interesting. I wanted to stay around, the explanation, the definition of carbon credits or carbon markets. Increasingly, it has become very common, particularly in the climate space. Can you explain to us how it works within the climate space? Particularly, lately, we see international organizations, governments, particularly from the global north, asking countries from the global south to get carbon credits, or the World Bank, institutions such as the World Bank, the UN, advising countries from the global south to get carbon credits or to access carbon credits or the carbon markets. So can you explain that to us?
Sure. You will agree that, when it comes to the emissions, countries or even continental emissions, what we emit in Africa is still less than what just US emits, US alone emits, right? So our emissions are not that huge, but of course we emit nonetheless and must reduce. And there are opportunities for us to do so. So when we talk of the role of Global South in doing so, we are looking at tapping into the opportunities that exist for us to reduce the amount of carbon we emit, basically, or take advantage of changing from fossil-based infrastructures, unlike our North partners, so that we don't repeat the same efforts. Now, but to get into the conversation about the opportunity for Global South and why the Global North sometimes say these things, when you look at the carbon market, you can have a compliance market and voluntary market. When we talk of compliance market, we have in countries where certain big emitters, companies that emit a lot, are basically by regulation charged to reduce the emission or not to emit beyond a certain point. So, and not to emit is not to basically produce, because production is where emission comes from, whether it's from agricultural sector, energy generation, etc. So what then happens is that they have the compliance market. EU, for example, has something like that. If you want to emit beyond what you have been assigned by the regulatory authorities as your carbon cap, you can then go to Global South and say, look, you have the opportunity to maybe do afforestation, plant some trees, and the trees will capture some carbon that has already been emitted.
Yes.
And I will take that as if it is my reduction from my production, but I pay you. So that is an opportunity for Global South as a business and job creation venture to take that option, reduce the amount of carbon they would otherwise also emit, and still get some sort of incentive from the global north from that. That is basically the compliance market. We have the voluntary market where you are not compelled by regulation. But if you, for example, say your company, you don't emit a lot, you are very conscious of the environment. We have many friends who are environmentalists and basically would prefer a company that is much more environmentally conscious. So it's a form of corporate social responsibility, a marketing campaign that can also bring some revenue to you. So without regulation necessarily binding you to certain emission caps, you can still voluntarily decide to undertake those measures by going to the carbon market, supporting Global South to basically undertake emission reduction or avoidance activities for which you earn some incentive or reputation for it, basically, in short.
Yeah, so the concentration is always on the Global South, whether Africa, Asia, or Latin America. So why is the Global North, not talking about they themselves going to carbon markets or carbon credits? Talking about why are they not focusing on carbon credits and transporting that to the Global South?
Okay.
If it is something good, if it is something that is good for all of us, if it is something good for the environment, if it is something good for humanity, why are they transporting these wonderful ideas to the Global South and not they themselves benefiting from these carbon credits or carbon markets?
Indeed, that is a very good question and a fair question to ask. And just to digress a little, it brings to mind a conversation that often repeats that, for example, we talk of climate change because all this conversation relates to climate change. We talk of climate change and we say, look, Global South, we have been asked to reduce emissions, etc. But when you talk of the impact that has already been caused by our activities on the environment, our contribution is smaller.
Yes.
So why are we still being looked at? And I always like to use this analogy that, look, I'll get back to the question. I've not forgotten.
Yes.
I always like to use this analogy. So now we are talking about basically mitigation. We are talking about climate mitigation, reducing the emissions. We are focused on mitigation. But then, of course, we have the other angle of climate, which is the adaptation. We already have erratic rainfalls. We have increasing temperatures. We have drought happening. And it affects us more than it affects the global north. And this is caused by climate change. So the question is basically now, okay, our roof is on fire. Our roof, global south, our roof is on fire. And the conversation is, wait, we didn't set the fire. Somebody else set the fire, right? So we should maybe, relax and let them try to quench it. And they are saying, well, we'll give you some bit of water to use to quench it. And we say, well, no, it's not fair. You should quench it. Unfortunately, we do not have the overarching power to hold anybody to really account to the quantum of their cost. And because of that, we must still find a way to quench our fire. While we talk about how they can help quench the fire they have set on our roof, we must be fetching water as well, right? So that is the first angle. Now to the question of why the conversation is always back focus on global south. Yes, there are carbon markets in the global north, and they are doing some good amount of works in that area. But I think the opportunity that comes normally to global south is, if you look at infrastructure sector, talk of energy, we have what we call we have fossil-based plants and we have locked infrastructure. If you build a thermal plant today that is supposed to last you 30 years, and all of a sudden you are told that let's close the plant down because it emits. Because the plant has not been, used for its useful lifespan, you don't want to abandon as a good infrastructure.
Yes.
So, but when you come and to the global south, we have lack of infrastructure. There is infrastructural gap, and we are now building new infrastructures. So why would we want to build the old type of infrastructure we are trying to move away from? Meaning the opportunity for us to really meet our infrastructure needs using where we are going, which is an infrastructure that is more appealing and environmentally friendly.
Yeah.
It's huge. I think that is where the conversation usually focuses on, that look, global south, look, you can do this, because we already have a gap that we are still filling. And instead of filling that gap using the old technologies which are causing environmental concerns, why don't we think of new technologies that are environmentally friendly? For the global north, they basically have full infrastructural assets. So they are sort of waiting for those infrastructures to basically, elapse their useful lifespan to elapse. Then, of course, rebuilding of new infrastructures, they will have that progress into the new type. But of course, we know already they are doing and investing a lot in the new type of infrastructure. They are not only telling us to do and not do anything, they are doing something. Of course, argument or conversation can be had as to the adequacy of their efforts vis-a-vis the level of emphasis they put on global south to do same. Yes.
Okay. This is interesting. Viewers, if you're watching us, this is the Green Transition Show with me, Dr. Francis Tuokuu. Our guest is Dr. Benjamin Batinge. He's a research fellow with the University of Energy and Natural Resources in Sunyani, Ghana. Our topic for discussion is carbon credits, the new resource curse. We encourage you to subscribe to the channel on YouTube. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, TikTok, and on Facebook as well, to encourage us, motivate us to continue to bring you such insightful conversations. Talking about resource curse, traditionally, resource curse has often been associated with the oil and gas sector and also mineral mining, right? You have done some work also within the oil and gas sector. I want to find out, can you compare the conversation we're having today, carbon credits, with the resource curse associated with the extractive industries?
Yeah, thank you very much. Indeed, the issue of resource curse has been a bane for us. And in as much as we talk about this new opportunity in the carbon markets, we must be, conscious of the potential risk. Indeed, there is the likelihood of that occurring. I don't, from where I sit, foresee to be something that could potentially, rise to the quantum of what we've witnessed in the extractive sector. And the reason I'm saying that is this, unlike the extractive sector where you can have, what we call almost like the tragedy of the commons, everyone tries to go and, extract the resource with less recourse to the environment, or the resulting issues of, whether it's politically related corruption issues that then tends to even worsen the lives of people. I think carbon market is a bit different, and the processes laid down even to account and make sure you really understand how much carbon a person, an entity, or a country is offsetting so as to then determine the sort of incentive they are giving. It's a bit more organized and nuanced than that of extractive sector. It does not mean that we cannot have the resource curse. In fact, it can happen, and it can happen in various ways. Now, let's say we increase the carbon price and it becomes an incentive for a lot of people to go into the and business of carbon market. So issues of land grabbing, somebody may tend to take a land that could be used for agriculture and produce food or other equally important economic activities for the people. Somebody then decides to use that land, say to turn into a forest, so as to basically calculate how much carbon they are offsetting, get a certificate and take to carbon market and sell at the expense of people who could also use that particular piece of land, right? And of course, we also have the situation of human rights challenges that comes with basically again violation of land rights issues, just as we have with the extractive sector, where productive lands can be taken, whether it's for mining or it's for oil, etc. We have that chance to get into that loop of resource case, but I think the quantum of investment and required for you to demonstrate that you have actually undertaken an activity that merits you to get some carbon credit is a bit beyond the individual level. We have institutions in Ghana, a few institutions that have actually made this attempt, and they've done it especially in the area of clean cook, where they design cook stoves that are a bit more energy friendly, energy efficient, and with that, the amount of basically energy, that is firewood, etc., used has been reduced. And since you have emissions from firewood, if you reduce the amount you use to still meet the same cooking needs, you end up reducing the amount of emissions done totally. And they've successfully done a cook stove Ghana. They've successfully done this, and we're able to actually get carbon credits for yes.
You talked about land grabbing or land dispossession, if you like, and so do we consider those as early warning signs? Are they early warning signs? And what are the early warning signs generally, associated with the carbon markets or carbon credits?
Yes, indeed. The early warning signs, it may start with maybe simply institutions coming to purchase areas of land from people who at the moment probably needs the money more than the vision to protect it for a longer economic benefit. So that is an early warning sign. They're taking advantage of people who are vulnerable already. You know that offering them a given amount is just going to incentivize them to sell off the land. So that, yes, that is an early warning sign in a way. Also, really not engaging people in even conserving areas. This is not even just at a corporate level, even governments. Government can end up, cordoning off certain areas that were, that belong to local communities and decide to turn them into conservation areas, plant trees, etc., as part of efforts to really simply promote that there is a good amount of activities towards reducing emissions, so as to also get some credit in the carbon market. So I think these are some of the early warning signs that we must watch out for before they turn into monsters we can barely control.
Yes. Monsters we can barely control. Related to that is that critics have argued that those early warning signs you just mentioned, it's making the carbon trading or the carbon market a carbon, what they call carbon colonialism. Do you see that? Do you see carbon colonialism associated with the carbon trading or the carbon markets?
Yes. Carbon colonialism can happen. In fact, again, just as I insinuated earlier, you have already local communities that own areas of land. Let me go back to the land again. And they are willing to sell this to individuals that come with a good amount of money to basically use as enterprises to earn some carbon credits. And we've had also even some stories within Africa about that. I mean, I recall the case of some Norwegian companies in East Africa, right? They basically went and acquired huge amount of land and planted eucalyptus and pines, and now this land that can be used for a lot of activities for those communities, but they planted these things. They can sell woods or timber from them, make economic benefit, and at the same time still use that activity, that afforestation activity, to basically earn some credits in the carbon market again. So yes, it's sort of colonizing those communities indirectly. And in as much as we may say that people are aware of what they are getting into, I think when you have less options, that is, you don't have what to feed on today, and somebody brings you something you can survive. You at least you must survive before you fight. If you can't survive, then how do you fight? So sometimes it may appear like having option, but it's no option at all.
Yeah.
Yes.
And in your candid opinion, be honest with me, who truly benefits from the carbon market? Investors from the global north, governments of the global south, or communities from the global south? Who truly benefits from the carbon market?
I would like to say globally, right?
Yes.
Wherever somebody is reducing emissions, I should be happy. Wherever somebody is reducing emissions, I should be happy because it benefits the planet. Benefiting the planet means it benefits all of us. And this is particularly the case because you see, when we talk of emissions, if I emit here, it doesn't mean that I necessarily be the only one to suffer from it. It gets into ozone layer, and then a lot of people are affected. Emissions is no respect of borders, right? If the emissions had respected borders, we wouldn't be complaining that the global north emitted and but we are suffering. It is because those emissions didn't respect the borders. They crossed and came here and affected us. But in terms of the beneficiaries, general, I think the planet benefits and all of us benefit in that way. But honestly,
Yes.
the players in carbon market,
Yeah.
no one, I think, plays or goes into the carbon market without expectation of benefits. And
Yeah.
that benefit, we must admit that it is personal.
Yeah.
Just as if I go into the bonds market or securities market to put in an investment, I expect to benefit. It's the same in carbon market. Whether that benefit is in monetary terms where you get carbon credit and go and sell, whether it is simply a voluntary carbon market where you basically do your computation, carbon accounting, and show how much you have reduced and use that as a marketing campaign to even earn more clients for whatever franchise you own, it is still a benefit, no matter how indirect it is. So I think the players of the carbon market, companies, governments, these are the beneficiaries. Communities can benefit, but I think communities are the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
especially if regulation is not well put in place. Yes.
And that is the inequality or injustice, environmental injustice that I talked about in my introduction. In your view, really, are carbon credit projects developing emission reductions, or they're leading to pollution elsewhere?
Indeed. Carbon emission, they can actually, and we have what we call the carbon leakage. Carbon leakage, where, if a community is dependent on a forest reserve close by, right, for firewood or other energy resources, and I or the government decides we are going to sort of do some reforestation, conservation, and so as to earn some carbon credit from this forest. To really say that we have reduced emissions, we must then be sure that the activities that were happening there, whether it's wood harvesting, etc., or deforestation that was happening there, has not been shifted somewhere. If it's been shifted somewhere else that previously wasn't affected, then it means we are really not doing any carbon offsetting. We've just shifted. We save one area and then shift the burden onto another. We must do proper conservation or reduction. If not, I think that it brings the issue of additionality. There is additionality in carbon markets where if you want to really demonstrate that indeed your activities have led to some carbon reduction or have led to some carbon avoidance, it means that for you to get carbon credit, that activity shouldn't have been something that will happen anyway. So if we plan to build a hydro plant today because of convenience and economics, etc., and we go ahead and build that hydro plant, we can't then go back to the carbon market and say, look, we built a 30 megawatt hydro plant, and because of that, we've saved some emissions. If we had built a thermal plant, 30 megawatt hour, this is the amount of emissions we would have been emitting. So give us some carbon credit. No, it has to bring what we call additionality. It must be consciously done so that you can take the savings to the carbon market. I think that is important that we highlight that, so that people don't say, well, let's go back. We have forests. Why don't we calculate the amount of trees we have in the forest?
Yeah.
Just take it to the carbon market and get some incentives. It must be
Mm.
something initiated for the purpose of trading and then done over time to demonstrate that. And you have carbon auditing, third parties that will audit to show that indeed you have done this. You don't simply go and to the market and say, I have a forest this side, this size, so let's get some carbon credit for me. There must be evaluations done over time to really determine the amount of emission reductions that your forest is going to provide over time, and confirmed, validated before certifications can be issued to you. So it's important we know that.
Okay, consistent with what you just concluded on, what governance frameworks or policy frameworks can we introduce to ensure transparency and accountability within the carbon markets?
Indeed, policy is very important in carbon market. If there is no regulation, basically anybody will do what they like. Even in the compliance markets, that is very, very important. And we must put in place a method to first do proper recording, proper accounting. And I'm happy that Ghana, we have the carbon registry. Ghana has a carbon registry. So you can go online, EPA has a carbon registry, you can go online and register your activity, your project, and over time, record the activities of your project, etc. So there must be clear data, transparency, there must be transparency, there must be proper accounting, okay? There must be trusted third parties to really demonstrate that indeed what an entity says is doing is really the case. If not, we have the resource case actually finding its way back with corruption and other things, where people will have certificates for carbon credits that they did not really earn. That is very important. We must also have strong nationally designated authorities like EPA in the case of Ghana that are able to monitor the activities of institutions, organizations, and even individuals operating in this space. It's important that the carbon that is also reduced, when we talk of the reduction, it's not only about the avoidance, as I said, of course, beyond having afforestation to capture carbon, you can do what we call direct air capture. There are technologies to actually just capture carbon from the atmosphere, but you can't capture and release. There must be, storage. There must be permanence. Yes, and we must ensure that that is done. Then we must avoid things like double counting. Somebody will use the same activity to trade multiple times. So there must be very clear records as to what has already been used for, or what has certificates already been issued for, so as to avoid double counting. If not, the market will get adulterated and then it will just collapse. Yes.
Yeah. Viewers, I'm enjoying the discussion. Our guest is taking us through the carbon markets, what the carbon market, what is entailed within the carbon market, the benefits of the carbon market, and then the negative impacts or consequences of the carbon market. If you are watching us, this is the Green Transition Show with me, Dr. Francis Tuokuu. Our guest is Dr. Benjamin Batinge, a research fellow with University of Energy and Natural Resources in Sunyani, Ghana. Doc, I'd like us to still focus on the governance and policy frameworks. Do you think that African governments are prepared for the carbon market? And if they are, or if they are not, how can they be prepared to have good deals within the carbon market?
I don't think we are there yet. As I said, so Ghana has a carbon registry, and that is impressive, actually, when you look at it in African context. It's not many countries that are into that. And I will also say, in fact, we also have this private entity I talked about, the fact that they've actually even done carbon trading. Yeah. They've done carbon trading already. That is impressive. meaning they've consistently undertaken a project, measured the impact that is in terms of carbon reduction of the project, have third-party certified institutions that monitor and assess them, evaluated their activities, and agreed that indeed, over time, they have contributed to reducing carbon. And for that, they have earned some certificates which they were able to sell until they sold to Switzerland and had real money for it. So Ghana has done some good work in that area. Kenya has done a bit, but Africa in generally, we still have a long way to go. And so there's a lot of regulatory lapses that must still be sorted out. There is still a lot of political lack of interest in a way for specific reasons. And maybe you can also even talk about the fact that the local capacity to understand even the nuances that are within the market, how the regulatory framework is there, to protect, etc. There are still areas lacking. So no, we need to do a lot more. We are still behind. We need a lot more to be able to get there and bring a lot more people on board. Yeah.
And so talking about bringing a lot more people on board, what will a just and an equitable carbon market look like?
I think a just and an equitable carbon market will be one where communities where the activities that pertains to reducing or avoiding carbon takes into account the rights of the people. It must look at how the activities can impact them positively. Will it provide them some jobs? It must not hinder their economic activities. That is, if you are reducing or avoiding carbon and for that reason somebody loses their livelihood or loses their ability to earn one, then it is not just. It must be something that involves them, seek their consent, engage them. It must engage them, and it must get their consent of local communities. And this is particularly important, especially when we talk of the top-down global north to global south, sort of information flow or request that more should be done at global south, which again, as I admit, we have the opportunity, it must still be done within certain, frameworks that recognizes human rights, that doesn't deprive the communities where these activities are undertaken and doesn't hinder their progress. That is what a just and equitable carbon market would look like to me. Yes.
And, do you think that countries should prioritize local climate action over selling carbon credits internationally, or focusing on the international carbon market should be the solution to our climate problems?
I think we should try to do a balance. I wouldn't say we should prioritize carbon market because then that is going to bring some issues of injustice and issues of equity not being realized there. For example, at the national level, we have our NDCs. We strive to achieve them nationally determined contributions that we have, but we mustn't say because we have them, we pursue them to the detriment of economic advancement of the people. In fact, a lot of the NDCs are basically commitments that when it comes to enforcement, you are not bound by anybody really in terms of enforcement. Maybe it doesn't speak well of you as a country if you don't meet them, but it's still something that I think is secondary to the economic well-being of citizenry. And of course, issues of costs must be considered in ensuring that we don't pursue carbon market just leaving activities or local indigenous on the side. And how do we do that? If you take away resources that they use for daily living, and then you decide to use it for activities that will take you to carbon market for you to earn money, then where is that, that money is going, where is it going to be reinvested? Because sometimes where these earnings are done, the reinvestment doesn't come back to the people. Yeah. And again, a lot of also environmental issues, human rights issues. I think we must try to balance it, try to, as much as possible, improve our ability to earn some credit in the carbon market, and that requires us to do some serious carbon offsetting. But it must be carefully balanced with local conditions that is not undermining, economic opportunities, job creations, and basic livelihood of the people, because you need resources to do this, and those resources exist among communities where you are going to do this, and you must take that into consideration.
Yeah, thanks for that. There are people watching us who probably will want to pursue careers in the carbon market space. What advice do you have for them, and what can they do? For instance, graduate students watching us, or students watching us who may want to pursue careers in the carbon market. What can they do?
Oh yeah, there is a lot of opportunity for this area to develop. In fact, as I said, even the market setup is still not very matured in so many levels compared to other forms of trading. When you look at trading, whether it's forest trading, whether it is securities trading, etc., how the market is designed with extensive legislative instruments in various countries guiding it, and again with international ones in place as well for cross-border trading, etc. Those are very matured markets. So there are opportunities in actually looking at the regulatory frameworks of carbon market. There are opportunities for looking at specific types of carbon offsets. So whether there should be specific regulations for credits that are coming from carbon reduction. That is, I have planted trees and those trees have been able to capture some carbon, or I've developed technology and that technology has been able to capture some carbon. Maybe do we need specific market conditions? Do we need even different pricing for that kind of reduction vis-a-vis a type of avoidance where I could buy the, ICE, intensive combustion engine vehicle, buy my gasoline and also emit, but I choose to spend more and buy, say, an electric vehicle. So I am avoiding carbon. So should there be a difference in price or, pricing? Should there be different market conditions for reduction vis-a-vis avoidance? And even when you come to specifics, whether it's avoidance, should we break down into sectorial levels? If I reduce my emission by 1 ton in my energy generation, should I get the same credit as if somebody reduces their emission by 1 ton in transportation? So is one easier to do than the other, or is one harder to capture? There is a lot of opportunity to really get into the details of it to come out and help with a market that is very robust. So I will tell them there's so much we need to do in that area, and you can just pick an angle, and there will be a lot you can do with it.
Okay, so your final message, I would like you to leave your final message to policymakers, particularly across Africa. What is your final message for policymakers?
Policymakers, I will say, look, carbon market may not be mature in your specific countries, but it presents an opportunity, and we must commit to actually developing that market specifically, because it can provide opportunities for our various citizenries, and at the same time it can help us all together do our bit to fight the climate challenge that we face today. So policy must be in place, but there should be commitment, interest. In fact, let's start with you should develop the interest, have the interest that this is an opportunity that we can take advantage of to help our people. And from there, I think other things can follow, regulatory frameworks that is required to get it going, and then the people buy in, etc.
Yes. Viewers, this is the end of the show. We thank you for watching. We encourage you to subscribe to the channel on YouTube, the Green Transition Show on YouTube. We also encourage you to follow us on TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, and share our videos, comment on them, give us feedback, like the videos, and share with your friends and colleagues so that we continue to bring you very insightful topics or very insightful conversations such as the one we